You know, anticipation is a pretty big part of life, isn't it? I mean, some people anticipate Christmas. There's like this huge build-up to Christmas, and so there's that anticipation of Christmas. Maybe it's the anticipation of the wedding day, or having a new baby, or maybe it's getting a new job, or maybe it's getting a promotion at work and getting a big raise at your job, right? There's a lot of things that we can anticipate in life. You students, how many of you are anticipating and you're excited about going to school, going back to school on Wednesday? Parents, how many of you are anticipating and you're excited about your kids going back to school on Wednesday? Yeah, that's exactly what I thought was going to happen, right? So there's anticipation. I know some of you are anticipating me being done here in a few moments so that you can get to your favorite Sunday restaurant. Now, don't you think that I don't know, because I know, all right? But anticipation can be a pretty big part of life. What about when life is over? What kind of anticipation do you have there? I mean, as followers of Jesus, we have this huge anticipation, right? We have this anticipation of heaven, and we have this anticipation of heaven because we have hope, and we have this hope because of Jesus. Now, there are a lot of people around us that don't have this hope that I'm talking about right now. They don't have this anticipation of heaven. So what ends up happening is at the end of the day, they get up and they do the same thing day after day after day, and then at the end of the day, they wonder if this is all there is. Like, is this it? And maybe that's you. I mean, maybe you're here this morning and you'd like to have some hope. I mean, maybe for a long time now you've been wondering if this is all there is. I mean, is this it? Is this it? Listen to me, friends. The answer to that question is no. This isn't all there is. And you can have this hope that I have. You can have this hope and this anticipation that I'm talking about this morning, but it only comes through Jesus. Now, we've been in this series over the last few weeks that we've been calling Rogue Rabbi. And what we've been doing in this series is we've been looking at these different events in Jesus' life and ministry where it looks like he goes rogue, right? Where it looks like he breaks all the rules. Now listen, Jesus didn't break the rules, he made the rules, right? But here in John chapter 4, we're going to take a look at an interesting interaction between Jesus and a woman, and it's going to look like Jesus is breaking all the rules that were a part of his day, these cultural rules that were a part of his day. And so John chapter 4, we're just going to start at verse 1. If you have your Bible open, you can follow along and be on the screen behind me as well. So here we go. It says, "Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee." So Jesus anticipates, because all these people are being baptized, that there's going to be this confrontation between him and the Pharisees, and he knows it's not time for that confrontation yet. So he's going to leave Judea and he's going to go back to Galilee, all right? Verse 4. "Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon." Now here we go, because Jesus is going to break all these rules of his day, these cultural rules. "When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?' His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans.'" So Jesus has gone rogue here, right? Because John says that Jews do not associate with Samaritans. So here's what I want to make sure you understand. The Jews and the Samaritans, they had this deep distrust and dislike for one another. In fact, the Jews hated the Samaritans. The Jews considered the Samaritans to be like these half-breeds. They considered them to be like mongrels. In fact, if you touched a Samaritan, the Jews then believed that you were like ceremonially unclean, all right? And so they hated one another. And so I want to make sure you understand the seriousness of what's happening here, because you have Jesus who's talking one-on-one with a woman when he's by himself, they're alone, which was a huge no-no back in Jesus' day. But then, as if that isn't enough, it's a Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman. All kinds of rules that are being broken here, all right? And this woman who's at the well, she is hopeless. She has absolutely no anticipation whatsoever. But before it's over, Jesus is going to change all that for her. Now, it takes her a little bit of time to get there, because as she goes along in this interaction with Jesus, she kind of puts Jesus into some boxes. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to talk about these different boxes that I think we see the Samaritan woman putting Jesus in. And then I'm going to finish up this message time with just some points of application, all right? And so I want to talk about these 3 boxes that I think she puts Jesus in. Now, when you came in today, if you grabbed one of our bulletins on the back, there's some space where you can fill in some blanks, take some notes if you'd like to do that. You can also do that in the RCC app, all right? So let's talk about these 3 boxes. I think the first box that we see this woman put Jesus in is a box that can be labeled as man. As she begins to have this interaction with Jesus, she just sees him as just a man like everyone else. Let's go back to John 4, and let's start back at verse 7. It says, when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. Now, let's stop right there for just a second, because this is kind of important, I think, for us to understand. If you look in verse 6, John tells us that this happens around noon. So it's like blazing hot, okay? It's in the middle of the day. There's a lot of humidity. There's a lot of heat, so it's blazing hot. And other than Jesus, this woman is at the well by herself. Now, back in Jesus' day, the women would all get together in the village, in the town there, and they would go to the well together to draw water. And they wouldn't wait and do it at noon while it was blazing hot. They would do it earlier in the day when it was cooler. And so something is going on with this woman. It was like this social event for the ladies, right? Something's going on with this woman because she's not a part of this social event. She's there by herself in the heat of the day, all right? So let's go on and let's see what happens here. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, look what she says, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. So she just sees Jesus as a man, right? She's looking for a temporary fix to her immediate problem. I mean, Jesus talks about this water that he can give her, and she's like, yeah, give me this water. And she wants the water because she doesn't want to have to drink water herself again. She doesn't want to have to keep coming back to the well. And so she's looking for this temporary fix. Now listen, Jesus doesn't do temporary fixes. Now, he was fully man. I mean, we read here in John chapter 4 that he was tired. He's thirsty. We see throughout the Gospels where he's hungry. He knows what it's like to suffer. He feels physical pain. He has grief when he loses a loved one. Any of you ever grieved over the loss of a loved one? In John chapter 11, we're told that Jesus weeps when he loses his friend Lazarus. How many of you have wept because you've lost a loved one? Yeah, I've done it. I've wept over the loss of a loved one. He knew what it was like to have friends, but he also knew what it was like to be betrayed. He knew what it was like to be abandoned. And so he's fully man, but he's also fully God. And because he's fully God, he's not interested in this woman's physical needs, but rather he's interested in her spiritual needs. And she kind of begins to figure this out. Go back to verse 15 and let's read on. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. He told her, go call your husband and come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. And I want you to see this, because here in just a matter of a couple of minutes, she puts Jesus in a different box. The first box, he's a man. Look at what it says. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. So now she puts Jesus in a different box. Now he's not just a man, but now she says that Jesus is a prophet. Now we're beginning to understand why this woman is at the well by herself, aren't we? She has a reputation, and it's not a very good one. I mean, she's leading this sinful life, and it's a pretty public sinful life, right? Because Jesus says, you go call your husband, and she says, I don't have a husband. Now, she leaves it at that. She tries to hide it, and Jesus says, you know what? You're right. In fact, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have said is very true. And so she realizes now that there's something different about Jesus, right? And so she comes to the conclusion that he must be some sort of prophet because he has some kind of supernatural power that he's able to know about her life and her heart. And the only explanation for that, to have that kind of power, is that he's come from God. So he must be some kind of prophet. Now, even though she's beginning to recognize that he's a prophet and that there's something different about Jesus, she still doesn't really believe that Jesus can do anything significant for her. She doesn't believe that he can do really anything meaningful in her. She's just kind of curious about Jesus. She just kind of wonders about Jesus. In fact, I want you to go back to the text, and I want you to see this, all right? Look at verse 19. Look at what it says. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Now, can I just be honest here for a second? If she really believed that Jesus could do anything significant in her life, if she really believed that Jesus could change her life, rather than saying, I can see that you are a prophet, it would have been better for her to say, I can see that I am a sinner. And so she's just kind of curious about Jesus. She's just kind of wondering about Jesus. So he was just a man. He was just a prophet. But then she finally gets to the third box, and this third box is the most important box. And the third box that she puts Jesus in is the box that's labeled Messiah. Now, I want you to see what happens here as Jesus and this woman are having this interaction at the well, because in just a matter of a few moments, again, she begins to get a clearer picture of who Jesus is. Let's go back to verse 19 here in John 4, and let's read on. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, that Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Now jump down to verse 25. The woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. Remember, this was a no-no back in Jesus' day. But no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking with her? Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward him. She's finally getting there, isn't she? She's finally beginning to understand who Jesus is. She goes back to town. She says, could this be the Messiah? She's beginning to understand that he's the Messiah, that he's the chosen one, right? That he's the chosen one who's come to save his people from their sins. He can save this woman from her sins. He's the chosen one who's come to offer us forgiveness and give us a new life. You know, in the book of Acts, Peter's talking with a crowd of Gentiles, and while he's talking with them, he declares that Jesus is the ultimate judge. Talking about Jesus, look at what Peter says. He says, he commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he's the one whom God appointed as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. And so I love that, because Peter says that he is the Messiah. He's the one who has come as the ultimate judge. He's the judge of the living and the dead, and he offers forgiveness of sins. Even Jesus tells us that he comes to offer us this freedom. He's the Messiah. Look at what Jesus says. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. Friends, Jesus is our Messiah. He's the one who has come to set us free from our sin. And so Jesus was a man, he was a prophet, and then ultimately he was the Messiah. So if he's the Messiah, what does that mean for us today? I want to continue to look at this interaction with this Samaritan woman and Jesus. I want us to go a little bit deeper in this interaction this morning, and I want to talk about some things that I think we need to do that I see here in this text if we really believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So we're going to kind of wrap up with this, all right? First of all, if Jesus is the Messiah, then we need to take Jesus to others. If Jesus is the Messiah, if we really believe that he's the Messiah, then we need to take him to others. You know, I've got this tea pitcher up here. This was my grandmother's, my mom's mom. This was her tea pitcher. And I can remember growing up, this thing always had tea in it, and it was sweet tea, and it was so good. It tasted so good. In fact, it had so much sugar in it that when you poured it out, it took like 5 minutes for it to come out of the pitcher because it just like turned to syrup, right? Because it had some, not really. But that's kind of what it seemed like. But it was so good. And so I have this tea pitcher. Now, this pitcher means a lot to me. So you know where we keep it? We keep it in a china cabinet that's in our dining room. And we don't use this thing. We don't use it for water. We don't use it for Kool-Aid. We don't use it for sweet tea. And we don't use it because I don't want it to get broken. I don't want it to get messy. I don't want it to get all scratched up, right? And so we leave it there in the china cabinet. Now listen to me, friends. We come in here on a Sunday morning, and we're a part of this family gathering, and we worship together. And it's good that we do this. This is what we're supposed to do, right? But listen, God never intended for this room to be like a china cabinet where we're these pieces stowed out of harm's way. You see, friends, He's not looking for tea pitchers. You know what He's looking for? He's looking for clay pots. He's looking for people who are willing to go from here. And we're willing to go out there, and we're willing to get messy and a little scratched up and maybe even broken from time to time as we take Jesus, our Messiah, to a lost and dying world. In fact, I think what Jesus does here in the text kind of helps us understand this. Go back to verse 3. Look at what John says. John says, talking about Jesus, He left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now, He had to go through Samaria. So Jesus went where the people were. John says Jesus had to go through Samaria. You know what? No, He didn't. In fact, the Jews didn't go through Samaria. Now, even though it was a shorter route to go from Judea through Samaria to Galilee, they didn't go through Samaria. They took the longer route. They would intentionally go around Samaria in order to get to Galilee because the Jews saw Samaria as nothing more than a waste. But what others saw as a waste, Jesus saw as an opportunity. And so He didn't wait for sinners, right? He went to sinners. And so hear me, friends. God doesn't want us to be tea pitchers. He wants us to be clay pots. As the church, we're not to be a group of people where we just sit in here and we wait for the people to come to us. We're not to be an organization of people who wait for others to come in. We're to be an organism of people who go out and we take Jesus and His love and grace to the people around us. That's what He's calling us to do. That's who He expects us to be. He expects us to be these clay pots where we can get a little messy from time to time. Because let's be honest, right? If we go out and we take Jesus, our Messiah, to people, it might get messy. We might get scratched up. And we might even be broken from time to time. But we're not tea pitchers, we're clay pots. Our vision here at RCC is to be a loving and authentic Christ-centered family, bringing hope, freedom, and purpose to our local and global community. We believe that this is who God is calling us to be, and we're very intentional about this. We want to bring hope and freedom and purpose to our community, not wait for our community to come to us. This is what Jesus is calling us to do. Look at what Jesus says in Acts 1. He says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." I mean, friends, we were made for this. We were saved for this. We were made to go and not sit. And so let's not go around sinners, but let's be these clay pots and let's go to sinners with the power of the Holy Spirit to bring them the hope and the freedom and the purpose that can be found in Jesus. And so if we really believe that He is the Messiah, then we need to take Him to others. If He's the Messiah, then we need to be sure to invite. If we really believe that Jesus is the Messiah, then we need to extend some invitations. And I see this Samaritan woman doing this as she begins to understand who Jesus is. I really love what happens here in the text. Jump down to verse 28. Look at what it says. It says, "Leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, 'Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?' They came out of the town and made their way toward Him." Now, jump down to verse 39. "Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Him because of the woman's testimony. 'He told me everything I ever did.' So when the Samaritans came to Him, they urged Him to stay with them, and He stayed 2 days. And because of His words, many more became believers." Now, realize what's happening here. An outcast from the town changes the town. She is so excited about what's happening. She leaves the well. She goes back into town, and she just makes this simple invitation. Just come and see this man named Jesus. And friends, that's the invitation that we need to extend. I mean, as we go to our circles of influence and as we take Jesus the Messiah with us, right, and we take him to others like we just got done talking about, as we go to our circles of influence and as we take him to others, we just need to extend this simple invitation to just come and see Jesus. And we need to extend this invitation to come and see Jesus because here's the thing. You ready? Jesus is the only way this community is going to change. That's why we want to bring hope and freedom and purpose to our local community, because we believe he's the only way that this community will change. In fact, I want you to see how the community that this Samaritan woman was living in changes. Look at verse 42. I love this. Look what happens. This is one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. They said to the woman, hold that thought for just a second, all right? They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. You see how the town is being changed? They said to the woman, don't overlook that too quickly. Just 2 days before, nobody would give this woman the time of day. Just 2 days before, she's lonely, she's isolated. She's not a part of the social circle with the other women in the town. She has to go to the well at noon by herself. But now 2 days later, she's loved and accepted. 2 days later, her life has changed, the people around her are changed, and the town has changed, and it's all because she was willing to extend this simple invitation to come and see Jesus. Listen, friends, Jesus changes everything. He can change Rochester and Springfield and Edinburgh and Taylorville, and he can change our neighborhoods and our schools and our governments and our workplaces. He can change the way that we talk to one another, the way that we treat one another, the way that we love one another. And even more importantly, he can change the eternal destiny of the people around us who have nothing to anticipate after this life. Jesus can give them the hope that's only found in him. And so, friends, we've got to be willing to extend this simple invitation, if we believe that he is the Messiah, to just come and see Jesus. I want to wrap up with this. If Jesus is really the Messiah, if this is what we believe, then let Jesus quench your thirst. Now, remember just a moment ago, I said that this woman was focusing on her physical needs. She wanted Jesus to give her this water that he was talking about so that she wouldn't have to drink water again, so that she wouldn't have to keep coming back to the well. She didn't want to be physically thirsty anymore, but Jesus wasn't in it for her physical needs. He was in it for her spiritual needs, right? And so go back to the text. I want you to see this, verse 13. Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. He told her, Go, call your husband and come back. Now, I love what Jesus does there, because it's almost like Jesus says, you know what? Let's not talk about the well anymore. Let's talk about you. And so he says, Go and call your husband, and then come back. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and now the man you have now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Jesus is confronting her sinful life head on, right? I mean, Jesus starts this whole line of questioning because he wants to get to the root of the problem. He wants to get to her sin. Jesus wanted to do so much more than just take care of her physical thirst. He wanted to change her life. He wanted to give her hope and freedom and purpose. This woman was looking to quench her thirst with water from the well when Jesus just wanted to quench her thirst. Let me say that again. This woman wanted to quench her thirst with the water from the well when Jesus just wanted to quench her thirst. So I think it requires us to ask the question. Do you have some kind of thirst? Some kind of emptiness in your heart and in your life right now, and you've tried everything but Jesus? You've tried everything but Jesus, and you sit here this morning and you realize, I'm still empty and I'm still thirsty. Because, friends, Jesus is the only one who can truly quench your thirst. I mean, there are people around us every day, and maybe you can relate this morning, but there are people around us every day who are hiding pain, and there are things in their life, secret things that they don't speak of often. And they're looking for something that will rise up in them, that will cleanse them and heal them and refresh them and quench that thirst. But they're looking for this quick fix to their temporary problem. And so what kind of quick fix are you looking for this morning? What kind of problem, what kind of emptiness, what kind of thirst have you carried in here today in your heart and in your life, and you're trying everything but Jesus, and you're still thirsty and you're still empty? What kind of well are you using to try to quench that thirst? I mean, that was the Samaritan woman. She didn't understand initially. She wanted her thirst to be quenched by the well. And Jesus is like, it's not about the well. It's about me. This cannot truly quench your thirst. And so what empty well are you drawing from to try and fill that emptiness, to try to quench that thirst? Maybe it's the well of career. Maybe you want to be at the pinnacle of success and you don't care what you have to do to get there. You don't even care how you have to cheat to get there, right? And it certainly doesn't matter who you have to walk over to get there. You just want to get to the top because somewhere along the way, someone told you that you're just not quite good enough. Maybe it's the well of possessions. And so we collect houses and cars and boats and big bank accounts at the expense of the really important things in life because we think that if we have all these things, then maybe we'll have some significance. Maybe it's the well of sex, premarital sex, an affair, maybe something like an addiction to pornography. Or maybe it's alcohol, or maybe it's drugs, but we go to these things time and time again, over and over and over, because the pleasure that those things can bring allows us to escape the pain for just a few moments. Maybe it's the well of perfection. Like if every stitch of clothing is in just the right place and every hair is styled just right, then that'll define who I am rather than us trying to discover who God says we are. Maybe it's the well of control. If I can control my spouse, if I can control my kids, if I can control the way the house looks or the way the dishes are put away or the way the laundry's folded, the way the tools are arranged, then I'll have this sense of satisfaction and empowerment. But we go to these wells over and over and over, and we just end up still being thirsty, and we're still empty. Because Jesus is the only one that can fill our emptiness. He's the only one that can quench our thirst. In fact, look at what Jesus says. He says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I mean, friends, understand, these empty wells that we draw from, they are external and temporary, and what Jesus wants to do is internal and eternal. Jesus didn't come so that we would keep going to these empty wells. He came to bring us a fullness of life. He came so that He could quench our thirst, so that He could fill our emptiness. Now, as the Samaritan woman begins to understand that Jesus is the Messiah, I love what she does. Let's go back to the text one more time. I'm almost done here. Look at verse 28. John says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? So I love this little detail that John records here, and if we're not careful, we can just kind of skip right over it. But John says, she leaves her water jar, and she goes back to town. She's so excited about what Jesus is doing. She's so excited about this interaction, this encounter that she has with Jesus, that she forgets her water jar, the very reason that she'd come to the well in the first place. And she goes back into town. So she leaves that water jar behind, that empty water jar. You know ultimately what she does, right? Because of Jesus. At that well, she leaves the emptiness of her life. Jesus is the one who can quench her thirst. Jesus is the one who can fill her emptiness. In fact, she is beginning to realize and understand that Jesus just doesn't know every fact about her life, but he loves her while knowing every fact about her life. And you know what? He knows you. He knows me. He knows every fact about your life. And he loves you while knowing every fact about your life. And he's the one who can fill your emptiness. He's the one who can quench your thirst. And so what emptiness have you brought in here today? What empty well are you drawing from to try to quench that thirst and fill that emptiness? Here's what I want us to do this morning. We're going to end this time a little bit differently. But Ethan and the worship team, they're going to come. They're going to sing a song. This is a new song. I love this song because this song reminds us that Jesus never fails. And so while they're singing this song, what I want to ask you to do is I want to ask you to be seated. I think the words are going to be on the screen, and so you can reflect on the words of this song. But I want you just to remain seated. When you came in today, there should have been a card on your seat, a note card. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to take some time during this song, and I just want you to think, is there an emptiness that you've brought in here today? Is there a thirst that you have this morning? And you've tried everything but Jesus to quench that thirst and fill that emptiness. Here's been my prayer this week. That we are having such a powerful encounter with Jesus this morning. That we're willing to leave that emptiness behind and let him quench our thirst. And so what is that emptiness? What is that thirst that you have? What empty well have you been drawing from? And maybe as you've drawn from that empty well, maybe there's been this secret sin that has developed in your life and you hold on to it and you keep going back to it and back to it and back to it. Maybe it's one of the wells that we just got done talking about. Maybe it's the well of like a critical spirit, like you tear everybody else down so you can feel better about yourself. Maybe it's an unwillingness to forgive. You're holding on to this bitterness and this anger and this rage against someone else because you think it's going to punish them. But you're finding out it's just empty and you're thirsty. And only Jesus can fill your emptiness. He's the only one who can quench your thirst. And so whatever that thirst is, whatever that emptiness is, whatever well you've been drawing from, whatever secret sin that you may have in your life, I want you to write it down on that card while Ethan and the team are singing. And then I just want you to get up during this song, and I want you to bring that card and I want you to drop it in this empty water jar right here. I want you to leave that emptiness behind. I want you to be filled by Jesus. I want your thirst quenched by Jesus. Because Jesus never fails. So write it down on that card and come and place it in this empty water jar and leave the emptiness behind this morning.
Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Everything around me is shaking. Well, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause He's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So I He won't. He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I built my life on Jesus. He's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. He won't.
won't fail. I want you to look at what Jesus says. Matthew chapter 11, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened,